Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, whatever time zone it is, wherever you're in the world. It is your Lore Saviour in the Lore by Night estate living room rather than my own personal bedroom. For that reason, as I'm with my dogs, you're going to hear noises from them. One snores like a pig, and we have a wooden floor, so we've got a little tipper-tapper of their little claws on the wooden floor. And if you were wondering, oh, Lore by Night sounds a bit off, like a bit ill, I am. I'm getting over a chest infection, which I cover a little bit in a card that's going to pop up there, which is going to take you to a video down there. And to that end, I think we should carry on talking about my home game of Chicago by Night, because even though I should be resting still, I'm getting a bit wound up not being able to do much, and I feel well enough just to waffle as oneself rather than do any voice acting for the Lore by Night podcast proper, at least at the time of recording. I want to talk about my home game Chicago, which of course all of this may be null and void by the time this comes out in a month's time, a month as of the 8th of March 2024, in the year of our Lord Talos, not 23, I haven't made that blunder yet. Anyway, in the most recent game of our home Chicago by Night, you may recall that lots of interesting things happened. Brujah player met a Tzimisce anarch who knew the location of their sire at the University of Chicago. We had Lasomrba player who had all sorts of adventures in their club, the Abyss, potential shapeshifters and a Lasomrba patron, for lack of a better phrase, and Malkavian player whose touchstone has joined the Midnight Circus, and the session ended with them kind of being taken away in a police station as their stalker enemy individual has been, well, tried to commit murder because they found evidence. They took pictures of Malkavian player feeding, which kind of formed the basis of the entire most recent session, where all of this happened in the, I want to say the 18th? Yeah, the 18th district, because there's 25 in total. The police stations. It might have been 25. I don't remember. It was after 15 anyway. And I gave some little factoids about the police and how they have the second largest number of police officers in the entire US. Or the highest. No, it was the highest number of police stations. The most being New York. And California has the most number of police officers, which is over 300,000 or 100,000 or something like that. I had it written down. I've deleted it from my little notes on the server. The point is there's too many police. And the money should be distributed elsewhere. But, and you may remember from me waffling about in the latter part of that session, I expected my players to do something really stupid. Technically speaking, they did, but we'll get on to that. But what I meant is that I was expecting them to, storm the police station and, completely throw the masquerade out the window, so to speak. But no, they didn't. They were fairly well behaved, but before we do that, we had the other two players join the Malkavian player at this police station. We had the Lasomrba player, driving their car, giving thoughts about the gravitas of the situation. There was also a little chase sequence, because you may recall me mentioning the ins and outs of that, which I can't mention at this point because it's a spoiler bit for my players, but it created lots of exciting drama. And as the next coming sessions unfold, I'm hoping that they're going to make certain connections. And if you know what I mean, you know what I mean. They didn't get a good look of who they were, unfortunately. I had a high number of successes in my head, but they did very well, especially towards the end. They did well with their driving roles. It started okay. There was a bit where it went kind of badly, but they managed to. They got a messy critical, and I sort of narrated how the Lasomrba was they were the one in control, sort of thing. The Lasomrba, the ones that control everything, they're core to oneself, sort of thing, and sort of got their shit together, so to speak. Because you remember with 5th edition Vampire, the messy critical is yes, it's a critical that you do really well, but a messy critical as described in the 5th edition's core book, you get aid from the beast, and the examples it gives you, oh, you are able to get the door open, but you tear off its hinges or tear the lock off or something like that, and in that scenario, That's kind of how I imagined it to be, because I don't think like just tearing the wheel off the car would have been appropriate. So that was just my image there, and the Lasomrba characters a bit more calm and collected and very. They regulate their emotions a lot better, at least in theory anyway. We also had the Brujah player who went straight from the University of Chicago to the police station, not having any idea what any of this was about. They were the one that were in the dark the most about this, because what would happen is that when they would all arrive, the Lasomrba player would accompany Malkavian player, who some of the police officers assumed was like a minor, and you can probably hear the soft rumblings of Holly snoring now, so just as a little heads up. And also the acoustics isn't fantastic here, because it's just brick wall, wooden floors, and glass. So apologies for that. So at the police station, most of the interactions happen between the Malkavian player, the Lasomrba, and a female presenting police officer, who I off the cuff named Patty Bryans, and my players would refer to as Officer Bitch, hence the title of this upload. Recap, session diary, whatever you want to call it. And the reason being is that she was the one that was leading the investigation. The players, they asked a question, like how well known they were, and I did like a generic like intelligence, politics, or streetwise, and they said, "Oh, you've seen their face about in like the odd newspaper here and there," or like, no, it was a Google search on their phone, searching up their name, and they've like led a load of homicide investigations, and they're like, "Oh, renowned police officer sort of thing, like working up the ranks, as it were," because that's technically what this was. The Joe Waller killed somebody, trying to desperation of getting that camera away, and like with this proof of vampires sort of thing. Or at the very least, that this individual that they've been tracking for months or years, I can't remember the exact time frame, is, for lack of a better phrase, a fucking nutter. So, of course, Malkavian player and Lasomrba, between them, were trying to basically try and get the camera back, and also trying to do what they could to answer the police officer's questions. And from here onwards, this is an exercise of how far I could bullshit my way through a session and not piss off my players. Because you may remember from the previous session, I didn't really have much idea of what to expect going into this, because my players were talking about different methods of approach of how to do this. But by the time that they got there, I think because there was a gap between the previous session and us actually playing, they're just kind of thinking it through and realising, we can't kind of storm through this place. There's police officers everywhere. They're gun crazy, as all Americans are. Not all Americans, but you know what I mean. It's fun to make the little jab, isn't it? But especially cops are in America. You hear that all the time. There's cameras everywhere. It's like top-notch security. So they just kind of had to play by the rules and just find an opening, as it were. And they were just going through the motions of things. And I was also having to make a mental note to myself, like how the players are interacting, so I could direct the interaction to the police officers accordingly. So, of course, the Malkavian player and the Lasomrba player, they were taken to an interrogation room. And from my very, very limited understanding about how these things work in America, because you may remember I actually watched quite a few of these investigation things, like Jim Can't Swim, Explore With Our Soul, and so forth. You've got like the standard room, which is like just basically a room, a desk, and two chairs, and they put like the criminal furthest away from the door in a corner, so the police officers, they could sit down and like lean forward and get in their space, interrogate them, and just a whole psychological warfare, and just break down their mental fortitude and willpower that way. But you also have like these more comfortable ones, which are kind of laid out the same way. Like they had in my scenario, they had a sofa furthest away from the door. The police officer would be sitting like on an armchair, and like she'd be leaning forward and chatting towards the player, like getting into a space a bit more. There was also an old camera like in a corner just pointing down at the sofa, which of course for the Lasomrba player, who appears all fuzzy wuzzy on cameras, that was a big issue. And that was kind of a big issue from the moment that she entered into the building. And they were left alone for quite a bit, the Malkavian and Lasomrba player, just sort of chatting away, and I made a point of saying, "Oh, you've been left here for like 40 or so minutes," and that was ridiculous, because it is. And sometimes these people can be left in much longer periods of time, sometimes like up to an hour, whilst the police just sort of like, do whatever else they need to do because these programs already cover what they do here. But a lot of the time they're just like watching and working out what... Because you could tell a lot of what somebody's thinking and doing when you feel that they've been left alone. Now, I did make a point saying that there was a camera there, thinking that they would be a bit more hush-hush, but there wasn't. The Malkavian player was talking a lot about, the clearly bullshitting, like, it's like, he's been following me for weeks and months, like, saying this, that, and the other, not really giving anything clearly defined for me as the ST to work with, but they kept focusing on the camera and how important it was to get that camera back, which doesn't make them look very good in all of this, really, does it? So I was just making a note of that, and someone was sort of like pretending to be like their legal guardian and whatever, and I was beginning to work out, okay, so how about we frame this in a way where the police officer now thinks the Malkavian player was involved, that this was like a team work, they worked together, like the Malkavian and Joe Waller was working together, and the police officer came back with like a bit of paper and like read out something known as the Miranda rights, which is basically you're being interrogated as a suspect now, and I made the player roll for it. And when the player realised what was going on and the character, it got a lot more tense, because now the police officer was like not treating them as a victim but now as a suspect, and Malkavian player wasn't being very helpful with that, just saying, I keep telling you what's happened, you're not believing me, and just like completely shutting down the conversation, which again is very suspect for the police officer. And I think the Malkavian player wanted me to react in such a way just to either cave in or like to escalate the situation to get the police officer like hit them back or whatever. In my mind, this police officer is like, homicide investigator. She's a very toughened and hardened individual, and I just made sure that she didn't react to a lot of these outbursts. Like, she just sat there and just leant forward, and the Malkavian player had blush of life going on, as did all the vampires actually. And I made a point of that because she just started crying when like another police officer had to come in and work out, to hand something over, whatever. And the police officer's like, "You finished? Can we continue?" Just really cold and cut off. And of course, the Lasomrba player, who had more dominate powers than the other one, couldn't really do much because, again, there's that camera that's pointing down on all of them. It's going to look a bit fucking weird. It was just very intense. Which was a lot of fun, and as a storyteller I did have to step in at one point, not for anything bad, like the player made a roll at one point. Once they did that, I used that as an opportunity to say, hey, if this is too much or I'm being too much, do let me know and I'll back off a little bit, because I don't want to make the players feel too uncomfortable. Like, obviously it's an uncomfortable, tense situation, and that's like part of the drama, and I want them to feel that. But I don't want to like make them feel like I am bullied them or being horrible or too harsh. And also, two of the players are femme presenting. One's mass presenting but non-binary. We're all autistic. Like, we're all in like various minority positions, and being interrogated by a police officer is a very traumatic thing for anybody. And for people in any minority position, the the legal law system is constantly against us, and I was just aware of this as this was going on. I just want to take a few moments just to say, if it's too much, do let me know, because I do think that's important. It's not something that's mentioned on a lines and veils like the green, yellow and red thing, at least it's not from what I can remember. But regardless, I was aware that I could be breaching some sort of barrier of trust here. It doesn't take much just to give a little heads up and say, if you want me to back off, I will. But no, fortunately, everything was all right. Malkavian player, we had a little break part way through, actually, where Lasomrba and Brujah player went to relieve themselves. And Malkavian player, who's actually my partner, as I've mentioned before, was just sort of sitting there with this like grin on their face, just shaking their head. And I said to them, What is it? And they just went, "You bastard." So it made me feel good that they felt uncomfortable, but in a good sense, And obviously I'm not trained as a police officer in America and with like their different techniques or whatever, but I was aware of enough of it just to like force that on them. And I was picking out little bits of their story, like the Malkavian player said, "Oh, I went for a walk in the middle of the night because sometimes I find it difficult to sleep," and then all of this happened. Well, they explained a bit more than that, and then there was the bit with the camera, which they then inserted into their story. And the police officer, "Well, hold on, you didn't mention the camera earlier on. When did the camera get involved with this? Why didn't you tell me the truth? Now you want me to trust you?" Like, just stuff like that, just being a complete dick. Hence the appropriate title of Officer Bitch. But there was an interesting bit partway through this that there was a break and they didn't take the phone away because they wouldn't do at this point. But Malkavian was like texting them on a group chat and like texted their Sire's details to Brujah player, like to leave a message to pick up. And Malkavian player Sire, Dana, didn't do anything and hasn't responded to any text messages for quite a while now. And I have my reasons for that, which we'll talk about in a spoilery section. But at some point, Officer Bitch goes and comes back with some 2 other people, because throughout all of this I was beginning to think I was going to drop in the hunters in a more subtle way, but all of this has been very suspect. And I think whilst the collecting of data, it doesn't take somebody too long to turn on the camera and start poking through the images that have been caught. And I thought, okay, this is clearly a bit sus at the very least, or whatever the legal terms of that bit. Well, suspicious, I guess. And I thought at some point, they keep going on about that camera. You know what? Fuck it. Let's bring in the SI now. Let's have a combat. Like, take him outside, try and off them, and really just crank up the fear factor right here. Because it occurred to me there hasn't actually been any combat yet. And these characters aren't built for combat per se, but I do think it's needed sometimes. I mean, this is a very role-play heavy group, a lot of socializing. So in this sense, a bit of combat would challenge them. And it's all, again, it's still very appropriate. So they didn't know what to expect, obviously. I didn't know what to expect. I was making up as I was going on as well. Officer Bitch and 2 other individuals like took them out to the back. At this point, Brujah player was just outside on the phone. I made them do like a wits and awareness thing to see if they could notice the players being taken through, like seeing them through the window, and they didn't. And when they made that and they didn't get enough successes, I just simply went, "That was a weird thing for me to ask you. Never mind." And that sort of like built a bit of tension there. So the SI hunters, which I now decided Officer Bitch was the part of, or Patty Brines to use her actual name, because I wonder if I say bitch too many times, YouTube's going to give me a little slap on the hand. So they took him outside to like this little outside storage bit, like right at the back sort of thing. I don't know the proper layout of the building, but I had a couple of images to work with to have some idea. And they opened up a bit of a storage, and it completely shocked everyone when they found, because they opened the door, they couldn't see through properly. A Malkavian player, I think they used heightened senses first to see what they could see inside. It said, "The headless body of Joe Waller," and everyone was like, "What the fuck?" And I just felt like a really great moment as an ST there, just to completely drop there. There was no build-up, there's no description. They opened the door. I didn't even mention the blood smell first, because that would have given away that something was about up. Now, obviously, something was about because they'd been taken up to a back room with an open door, and it's all a bit horror whatnot. But literally, they opened the door, activate hidden senses. What do they see? I don't make them roll for it either. They, the blood kicks in through their eyes, and it's like, oh, the headless body of Joe Waller is just slumped on the ground. It's like, oh my god! Like that was such a cool moment for me. Like Malkavian was like, holy shit! I did not expect that. Because something I forgot to mention is that all the way through this, they had the idea that the police are being controlled by a vampire, which, technically speaking, they're not wrong. It's Kevin Jackson, for sure, who sort of picked up the assets from Loading from when he died. But that's not, obviously, the idea I was going with at all, that the police have been infiltrated by the SI, for reasons I will explain later on. But they thought part of the reason why Patty Brines was like wearing sunglasses all the time is that she was a vampire, like, knowing to try and minimise the effect of dominate or whatever. That was a theory that the Lasomrba player had, which was an interesting idea, and I did ponder on that. And I thought, nah, just keep her as a police officer. It just makes her far more interesting to just make her a dickhead, just wearing sunglasses indoors, because who else does that? So they took him out the back and they saw this, and then when I did that, I could the waft of the blood came through, and then no, that was it. Malkavian player used unseen sight, or whatever the thing's called, that allows you to see if something's hiding in the room. And I said that the ghost of Joe Waller was like sitting in the fetal position, crying their eyes out, sort of thing. Oh, I need to backtrack for a moment because I just remembered something that really funny that happened. Part of the interrogation process, like the Malkavian player was like, you suspect me as a criminal, or like I'm not hiding anything here, and then completely undresses, like full on nude, like. And no one stopped them. It was all part of the police officer just like sitting back, like, please put on your clothes. And I was a bit more forceful here at one point, like, you're not getting a second warning, put on your clothes. Because then things would have become a bit more serious. And eventually that he did. But that was like a really funny, unhinged moment for Malkavian player. Peak Malkavian player moment. And that was the moment that completely caught me by surprise. Like, what the fuck are you planning on doing? Where is this gonna get you other than making you look like a weird suspect? But just like hashtags, just Malkavian things. But that was great. Like, the only thing that rivals that for me is like a GM. Is I ran a charity game a couple Christmases ago, which again the card for that is like up there now, which will take you down there for Jasper's game day, whatever it's called. And there was a player who tried to convince a cult that they were Cain, like it was a nodded cult, and the leader botched and the other person did really well. So it was like, okay, this works now. But like those two are like a fucking batshit crazy unhinged moments as a GM to endure. It's like, wow, what do you do with this? Let them run with it and just let them pay for it afterwards. But anyway, back to the combat. Lasomrba player, kind of realising something was up now, turned to opposite bits, like, who are you working for? And they said, Project Blacklight. And that's when the combat began. And so there was, I'm not going to like break down the combat bit by bit, but Brujah player got involved because there was gunfire, and they popped a cherry. They finally used some of their discipline powers, but really good moments to use it to, I have to say. There was lots of blood, and I tend to be really gory with the combat details, especially when the players do particularly well. Like, it's a general rule of thumb I have: if a player rolls really well for like a one bit of combat, and or the opponent rolls really badly, I dismember body parts, I break limbs. Because remember, you've got vampires against mortals who are supernaturally stronger anyway, and they're using gifts to like buff themselves up. The players, all of them were using blood surges, so they were that bit more powerful anyway. So it was important, just to make that really stand out in this instance. Like, we had officers who had dislocated limbs. One officer was drained near to the point of death because one player had really high hunger, and it just made sense. Oh, fuck it, just sink my teeth into you. Brujah player had a really cool moment where they were going to use blink as a means to tackle into somebody. They tackled into Officer Bryans. It's one of those moments like, well, the rules technically don't allow you to do this, but it seemed like a really cool idea, so fuck it, let's roll with it anyway. So what I ended up doing, I made them do the roll they needed to do, but I made them roll their strength on top of that, so they were rolling 3 things, like 2 attributes and a skill. And they rolled really well. And the officer, Brian, had their back to Brujah player, and they were kind of like unloading gun rounds into Lasomrba player. Obviously, I didn't make them roll for that because you couldn't really, with all the noise going, and they wouldn't be aware if somebody just goes, vroom, and just tackles you to the ground. They rolled really well, and to that instance, I said that Officer Brian had dislocated a jaw, or rather to the point where the jaw was practically hanging off, which is pretty horrific, but it made the player feel, that they did something really cool. Which it was. It was a really cool idea, and I loved just bending the rules of things a little bit, because why couldn't you use blink like that just to fucking tackle somebody to the ground? And that would hurt a lot. It's like kind of being hit by a car, essentially. And of course, my mind of, oh, this is going actually really fucking quickly. The players are doing really well. Oh, let's just introduce some random van that's been sitting there, and it's going to open up, and there's going to be like 3 other people now in full armor and rifles. And yeah, the Lasomrba player made quick work of them. One was dominated into killing another one. The next round they used Arms of Araman to basically finish everybody off and then split the dice pool and whatever. By which point one officer was dead, an SI agent was dead, one mysteriously disappeared, and I don't mean the fact, oh, they run away and nobody noticed them. It's just that I forgot one officer, and so did everybody else by the end of the combat, and it was just a bit, oops. But you know what? Because of how it ended, which we'll get on to, it will make sense. Brujah player used Blink again to whiz into the van and try and drag somebody out, which was a bit of a scuffle because of the awkwardness of it all. There was a police officer who was paying attention to Brujah player all the way through this. I had it in my head that they had no idea about none of this vampire stuff. They weren't part of the SI. So when they saw all of this was going on, they tried to run away, and Brujah player found them again. And at this point, Brujah player remembered that they had the burner phone and contacts to Damien to basically clean the rest of this mess up. And in my head, I was just like, finally! Just a lot of this would have been sorted if they just made that phone call to Damien. But you know what? At the same time, I'm really glad that they didn't, because it was such a really fun, intense session, and they all handled it really well. And when I got around to awarding experience point, if you follow by the rules, you should only give players in V5 1 experience point, which I thought was just a bit fucking mean. So I just default to the V20 way, where it's a base 3, you turn up, you progress the story forward, and you did cool shit. But I gave them 4 experience points, because all of them did really cool stuff, and they handled the situation well, and I'm just genuinely just so proud of all my players and my friends with the awesome role playing that they did, and how they interact with things, and how they just coped with everything so well. I've done quite a lot of vampire games with a whole array of different people, and this is actually one of my most enjoyable sessions as of the recording of this, because it was just a lot of fun. Nobody knew what we were doing, myself included. Improvising is one of my strong elements as a storyteller and games master. But yeah, everyone just did really well, and I'm just very proud of them. Really, really cool stuff. Even Malkavian player, my partner, decided in characters to fucking strip off butt naked. Their character decided to strip off, I should reiterate. Sorry, I should get back onto the game before getting into any trouble. So once they got Damien over, they had him deal with the remaining vampires. Just before that, one of the Lasomrba player had a frenzy, and they rode the wave of frenzy just to feed on something, just to take all their all their hunger away. And something that I do when you kill somebody when you feed, this isn't mentioned in the books, but this is something I pinched from the game Vampire by Dontnod Entertainment. Because in that game, when you're a vampire, if you drain somebody dry, you hear their last thoughts. I do that, but I also add in little montages of their life. So I had this boy came from a rough neighborhood, and he joined the army, and because he was a hunter, I don't think the players had much sympathy for him, but I ended off oh, Mum, I never made you proud, or something like that. I just wanted to see what the reaction of that would be, and hopefully in the future, if they frenzy and they just feed on somebody, some poor unsuspecting soul, that will just sting a little more. They got stained for killing somebody like that, but they didn't lose any humanity over it. So that's good. And I believe there was a stain from the previous session that the Malkavian player didn't get either. So that's good. No reduction of humanity there. Damien cleared a lot of this up, or said he was going to, and the players just got away. Brujah left in their van. Lasomrba left in their van, and Malkavian player left in the van that the SI hunters were in. And Brujah, Malkavian player, had the aware of it to go, is this like trapped or bugged with anything? I didn't make them roll for it because if you're like pulling a van apart that was already bare bones, you wouldn't find anything. And I just said, no, this has got nothing and this is just a van. So they all went their separate ways because it was approaching morning. And that kind of led to the end of the session. And there's a lot that I need to discuss now, but that's going to happen in the spoiler section. So if you're my players, this should be the place where I advise you to stop listening. If you're anybody else that wants to see what sort of ideas I'm coming up with next, do stick around. If not, because I can understand if people want some surprises, check out the various links in the description below for various vampire books that I use in my games, as well as my own homebrew. You purchase any of those using those links, I get some of the money back, because I'm an affiliate there, and it just helps me to build up my library so I can do the more regular dives and whatnot that you seem to enjoy. And as I'm recording this, I'm building up a library of cyberpunk material, because I've been posting quite a bit of that recently on the YouTube community tab thing. And you all seem to be enjoying that, and I do want to cover cyberpunk at some point. So, but you know, I'm primarily a World of Darkness content creator. So if you want me to do more World of Darkness material, do consider me helping me out financially. It means a lot. But if not, just use the whole usual like and subscribe bollocks. And with that out of the way, let's carry on with the spoilers. So there isn't a lot of new things per se, because a lot of this happened in the police station. But before I touch upon all of that properly, I've decided to revise the Zemitzi Anarch's purpose, and I do Anarch because I actually want them to be Sabbat still. That they're working with the individual who was meant to embrace the Brujah, who was a Lasomrba. And why do I want this to happen? First of all, I think it makes it a bit more interesting, and partly because I remembered that Crook, the contact of the Lasomrba player, the Nosferatu, was going to try and locate their sire, and obviously spend a while doing it, because they're not that influential in the city, and they don't have that grand of contacts. And it makes for an interesting dilemma between the Brujah choosing between the Cam and the Anarchs again. You know, this whole theme of pick a side, because the Brujah's trying to play them both against each other, sort of. You definitely want it as a Anarch sympathiser, and, you know, as I said, picking a side is an important theme that we're going with here. And it maybe seem very cut dry, oh, Crook has found the Sire here, with a phone call, and the Zemitzi's going to give a phone call at the same time. Sure, go with Crook, but you're going to potentially piss off the Anarchs. So it's not that straightforward from the Brujah's perspective. And of course, you go for the Anarchs, that's going to potentially wind up Crook. But we have no idea. And I have no idea. You have no idea, and the Brujah player has no idea, because they don't know this is going to happen yet. So I'll be very intrigued to see what this does. So what else do I have planned? Project Blacklight. Now, when I came up with this name, and I did come up with it because I remembered in the core book there was a blacklist lore sheet, but I misremembered it, and I thought that was a Blacklight, which I got confused with Project First Light, which is an SI operation thing. So in my ill state, I just smacked the two of them together and called it Project Blacklight, and Damien was aware of this, so I kind of have to run with it now. And I was thinking what I could do with this, and then it hit me in the most devious manner possible, and I sent a little picture of my players, like just putting like a really shot face, like a eureka light bulb moment sort of thing. And I don't think it's that profound, but when I came up with it, I'm really proud of it. So, in my head, Project Blacklight is the SI basically being aware that the Lasomrba have now joined the Camarilla, which I think, as far as they're concerned, they consider to be the vampire government. And how would they know this? Flyboy. Noah, the airport, he knew about the Lasomrba joining, and obviously witnessed a lot of this happening at the airport. Where, you know, coming through the airport, he was like scared in submission. He would have told his employers, because if you are aware, Flyboy's whole MO, he was an SI agent that was embraced as a vampire to spy on the vampires of Chicago. And that's where I think they all started to come in and influence the police station, that they've been sitting there dormant for a little bit, because remember, there was a month's gap between the sacrifice and what we're doing now, because it allows me to be a bit more lenient for moments like this, because Flyboy will just let government agents just come through all the time, where any other vampire would be a bit more on case with this sort of thing. And I'm sure as the players start to piece together, they're going to think, oh, the people that have been chasing the Lasomrba player earlier on, because remember that car chase, they were hunters. They're aware that the Lasombra's in the city. And it's like, no, that's the Hecata, remember. Remember to use the listener, obviously. The player doesn't know this, obviously. The ghost of Joe Waller hanging around this place. Because there was a moment before the end of the session, the Malkavian was teasing the ghost. They say, this is what you get. This is what happens when you stick your nose in. And the ghost's like, fuck you. Punching through Malkavian, not doing anything because, young Wraith doesn't know to employ their powers that way. And I was going to have our little Hecata show up in between Damien cleaning up this mess. And I also had this idea, and this is me being a right dick. I loved how much my players hated that police officer bitch. The fact that the players gave them a nickname just goes to show just a very short space of time the amount of resentment that they had there, and I absolutely love that. And I just thought it'd be criminal just to get rid of them that easily. That they're just like bled to death sort of thing. I've made her a vampire. She is going to be a member of the Hecata, who was embraced by Harry, who I don't think I mentioned his age to the Malkavian player. But obviously, he looks about 25-ish, but he doesn't mean he is that old, of course. So I will make this individual the sire of Patty Bryans. And they're going to have a Katarina the Rise sort of setup going on, that they cover their mouth. It's going to be like more of an assassin's mask sort of thing. And they're going to very quickly learn the ways of Oblivion. I'll bend the rules a little bit because, Oblivion ceremonies and blood sorcery rituals, they're supposed to take quite a lot of time to learn over. So I'm not going to dump them a load, but I'm going to give them some degree so they're able to use ghosts or whatever as like spies and assassins sort of thing. So this is going to be a vampire antagonist that's going to pester the coterie, and hopefully, for the players at least, Patty Bryant, offers a bitch, will get her final death once more. And I've also made a point mentioning on the relationship map that Joe Waller is a ghost on the relationship map, and I put the little Wraith symbol key thing there just to give that point there, because the player saw his ghost. He ain't going anywhere. He's still around. Obviously, he can't do what he was going to do, but he now knows for certain that vampires are real, that the person they've been tracking. So this is only, the hatred has only been built up a lot more, and it's only because I want the ghost to be used by either Patty Bryans or Harry Miller and the Hecata that I'm not making them a spectre. Because that would be just too easy, wouldn't it? Now, I could have made Patty Bryans a ghost, but I've already made a ghost enemy, and I think that'd just be more interesting doing it that way around. So, the Hecata's going to be slowly drip-fed into it more. Hunters are going to be more vigilant now. I've made a little handout, actually, a little email for my players, which I won't show at this point, only because I'm lazy and I just can't be bothered. But basically, Damien says, we're in some real shit. You all fucked up and all got sore on camera. I've done it the best that I can, but somebody's gone missing and I can only find their jaw, which makes the players realise, oh shit, she's alive. Which sort of makes people think, well, hold on, how can she be alive? Because we thought she died. Like, somebody else has been there. Another vampire has been involved, which may make the players think, hold on, maybe the person who was following the Lasomrba was a vampire. So much drama, so much spice, and I just can't wait for all my players, all three of them, just to have all these bits of drama. And before I pass off properly, I do have some ideas with Dana, the Malkavian player Sire, who hasn't been responding to text messages or calls. They've been working with Nikolai, Mr. X, that contact that's been giving Malkavian player all those contracts to fulfill. Because they had that little conversation, remember, Malkavian and Sire, about the dream that they had. And Malkavian, Sire, Dana is probably aware of all of this and had some sort of communication with them somehow. The details can be vague and nebulous. Realising that their outside forces at work and, maybe is starting to grow a bit cautious of their Sire, the child sort of thing. So whilst the players are going to be chatting away with each other, at some point I'm just going to mention to the Malkavian player, you've just felt your blood bond snap. Just randomly like that. No explanation. They're not going to pick up the phone still, which would imply that the Sire is dead, because that's the most logical conclusion here, because one does not simply break blood bonds like that. Unless, of course, you're dealing with somebody who has a specialty with blood sorceries, such as Nikolai, or Mr. X, who visited the dream. So the Malkavian player may think, oh shit, they've gone after my Sire. Because they did mention that the Sire has now become a bit of a liability. Lots of drama, lots of spice. So if you're enjoying this and want to find out what happens and what we get up to next time, like, subscribe, and check out the rest of the playlist that I've done and other campaign diaries. Again, buy the various books with the links below and support me using my homebrew. I get some of the money back and I can continue to produce wonderful Lore by Night content for you and World of Darkness content. And I can't wait to see you on the next upload, or whatever that may be, whether it be a Lore by Night proper episode or another one of these campaign diaries, or some other short video me just bitching about World of Darkness being a cunt and my voice is going, so I really need to fuck off now. Until next time, farewell.